We are on, Mr. Mitchell. So I am here today with Marq Mitchell, who's the founder and executive director of Chainless Change. Mark and I have been in the same environment, same spaces from time to time, but we've never really had like an in-depth conversation. So I was telling him that I'm really excited to have this conversation today. So thank you so much for being here. I've been interviewing a lot of your peers from the Saltwater Fellowship, and you are another exemplary Saltwater Fellowship fellow. All of y'all are amazing. And so I'm just really happy to talk to you today. So thank you for being here. Oh, my phone just went off. That happens. My son's calling me. Sorry. Let me put myself on do not disturb. Sorry about that. So thank you for being here.
Life. Let me make sure mine is silent, as a matter of fact.
I know, right? So, Leaders Talk Communications is all about highlighting how leaders themselves, you individually, your genius is Marq Mitchell, how you manage communications at your organizations so that other leaders can gain insight from you. So, I'm just going to jump right in. Your website talks about a recovery oriented system of care and describes Chainless Change as a recovery community organization. And the first in the state of Florida, by the way. And so tell us about your work at Chainless Change. You can define those terms if you want, and what inspires you the most about the work that you do.
For sure. So Chainless Change is actually the first recovery community organization that's specifically focused on justice involved folks in Florida. What it means to be a recovery community organization is for at least 51% of the folks that you engage with to be in recovery from substance use, mental health challenges. We kind of identify recovery a little more broadly, being systems impacted folks. Going
Mm.
through the system, folks experience trauma, which often, impacts their mental health and is one of the drivers to why folks might, resort to substances to cope from day to day. So we identify, our recovery process, recovery from trauma, the criminal legal system, from mental health, substance use. And the work for us has been pretty exciting over the past few years. I will kind of hint to this kind of being our first iteration of the organization. We've constantly kind of been working on how we'll evolve and, how do we make
Mm.
the biggest impact. And so the way we're kind of framing the work today is not how it's going to look maybe a year from
Oh, what? Wait a minute. Is this like a you heard it here first moment?
now.
You
For
said it
sure.
from now, so you're not ready to talk about it yet.
No, 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 not in full details, but it's there's a lot of changes in thinking through how do we invest more in leadership development of folks who are
Mm.
impacted by the criminal legal system, and instead of kind of working to address individual issues as an organization, really thinking how do we build the capacity of the collective of folks who are impacted by the criminal legal system to do
Ah,
meaningful work all across the country.
interesting. Oh, I love that. I love growth and bigger impact. So the I want to, what is it that inspires you about your work? What is it that inspires you the most about the work that you do, Mark?
I think it is being able to respond to the moment, right? Like we started initially
Mm.
just a bare bones weekend direct service project. We were doing like a lot
Ah,
of legal advocacy work around that time. There was a lot happening around access to voting and driving
mm,
privileges and occupational licenses due to fines and fees associated with the cost with contact with the criminal legal system. And so we initially
yeah.
kind of started just doing work along those veins. And then after a while, the organization evolved to include some recovery support services where we're, working with folks inside of institutions and supporting them with transitioning from incarceration back into the community and reacclimating themselves. And, we kind of did that work in response to needs that we saw. Uh, and kind
Mm-hmm.
of as time progressed, we realized, there needed to be some advocacy and organizing built into our work, as many of the issues that we are addressing are really tied to systemic and structural inequities. And so, we were able to evolve and kind of build in some organizing and advocacy and do some really, really meaningful issue based campaigns that resulted in some things changing. And so, yeah, and now we're working again to figure out how
Yeah.
evolve to meet the moment that we're in right now. And so I really like that we as an organization are able to stay within our mission, right? Not creep from the mission, but
Yeah.
work towards transforming ourselves in the way that we're showing up for our community, and in a way that's most meaningful for them.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Meet the moment. And evolve as you do that, because the moment changes.
Yeah.
And I love that you talked about mission creep, because that is it's a huge issue, and so you're conscious of the fact that you've got to stay within mission even as you do the work that you're doing.
Yeah, for
Tell me about the different stakeholders that you with whom you communicate, and where you feel you as Marq Mitchell thrive in communicating with those different stakeholders. Who are the different folks you have to talk to? You have to communicate with?
Yeah, the biggest stakeholder for us is folks in our community who are directly impacted by the criminal legal system, individuals and families. And I feel like I do best relating there, and along the
Hmm.
way had to figure out who were the other crowds that I needed to talk to
Yeah.
to be successful in this role. But that's kind of where I thrive. Secondly, I think I do a pretty good job with connecting with folks around our mission who are funders. That's become a core part of, my day-to-day responsibilities. And so I've had to do some work to refine a pitch and be able to share
Mm.
information in a way that's digestible, because it's really easy to, kind of get caught up on speaking a bunch of jargon that no one else understands, simply because you're working in a particular field or industry. And so
Yeah.
it's
I
taken.
saw you do a good job on your website of defining. I saw the definitions on there. So did you have to like dissociate yourself somewhat from the definitions when you're talking to different audiences so that you can connect with them in a way that is going to resonate with them?
Yeah, I often have to do that, figure out how do we just speak plain English in a way that connects with folks.
Yeah, yeah. So you've got the folks in your community that you communicate with, you've got funders and partners. You also have staff members that work with you as well. You said 51% are in recovery in some way themselves. Um, and where do you feel you thrive in the way that you communicate with your staff members?
I think that what's most important for me is for our folks to know that the work that we're doing, one, is important, but also is bigger than me as an individual, right? And so
Mm,
I am really, really careful to ensure that the way that I communicate with folks shows that anyone can lead, if you're committed to to the work that needs to happen, and showing that I'm a human, right? So I have challenges, just like everybody else, um,
yeah.
and that doesn't
And so
mean.
as a leader, you show that to your staff?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Very,
Yeah.
very transparent about that. I mean, as someone who's directly impacted by the issues that we're doing work around, I think it's important to show folks that I'm not this anomaly. You too can do this thing if you commit to
Mm,
it. Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah,
Love
it felt
that.
like I'm sure that I communicate, do my best to ensure that I communicate with our folks in a way, and not just staff, also our members, our base, in a way to let them know, you know, you can, this is possible for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask you for a specific example. Like take in terms of the way you reimagine the way you communicate with people. So is it that instead of saying like what's terminology, a specific term or something that you've had to change in the way you talk about it? And what's the plain folks language that you converted to as a result? Like just give me an example. I'm curious how you specifically
Abolition.
thought through change. Ah.
Right? We're an abolitionist-based organization, which means, that we don't believe that jails, cages, and censorships are the ways to address society's problems. But if
Mm,
you speak about it at if you walk around just saying abolition, it's going to polarize some folks and confuse others, right? And
yeah,
so it's really important to talk about investing in community and investing resources in ways that transform folks' lives instead of putting them at a deficit, which is exactly
yeah,
what incarceration does. And
yeah,
that's why it's important to reimagine the way that we respond to harm and violence without continuing to perpetuate more harm and violence.
yeah. Wow, that's a really good, it's a great example that you share, and it's a lesson for other organizations because so many and other companies who get mired down in jargon and lose people, right? Like I can totally relate to cages and second chances, which you also mention a lot on your site. That is language that an average person will understand who's not as involved in the work and as deep into the work as you are.
Yeah.
So, what's the number one communications challenge you faced as a leader, and how did you address it? How did you handle that challenge?
Beyond time? That's issue number one.
How
Numero
does
uno, time.
how is time an issue for communications? How
You
would
have
you connect those two?
you have to find time to do the work, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You have to find time to do it. And we're even though we have
Mm,
staff, we're a smallish shop, and so that's number one. But I think being able to share data in a way that doesn't feel
mm,
overwhelming, right? Like, you know, um, it's all of the funders and folks who support your work, even stakeholders, if they're wanting to part or you're considering a partnership, wants to be able to understand the impact that you're making, the
right.
impact that you're aiming to make, and being able to communicate impact through stories and just instead of just a bunch of numbers. It has kind of helped to ensure that folks who may not necessarily understand the day to day of what we're doing can at least get a glimpse of what it is that we're accomplishing through our work. Um,
Hmm. Were you just using numbers and data in the past, and you've had to reimagine? Like, yeah, I mean the numbers are important, but when you can tell a story behind those numbers and show a face with the stories, that's certainly more impactful.
Yeah, for a long time, I was running around saying, 67% of people will be rearrested within 2 years, whatever, after
Mhm.
release. That's the national data. And here we are with, only 25% of folks returning. And so, it was really
Mm.
important to be able to show the numbers, but we had to figure out how to communicate that differently.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I hope it's that rather than 25% returning, it's 85% not returning.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. And then sharing their stories. You do a really good job also on your site of sharing stories. I mean, a really great use of video as a channel of communication on YouTube. Um, what are the primary channels of communication that your organization use? I follow you on Instagram. I
Mhm.
know you got a YouTube page, you got your website. Do you do any email marketing?
We do some emails, some newsletters. If folks are communication specialists and interested in providing support in that area, I want to point because that's one of the things that I barely get time for.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And smaller organizations, everybody's got to pitch in and do all of it sometimes, and that's
Yeah.
challenging. Yeah.
It's
It's
part-
important when you've only got a limited amount of time to figure out which are the channels that are most important,
Mhm.
um, based on what we're trying to achieve. Like you've got these big plans for the coming years. Like who are the people who are going to help you get there, and where are those people living, working, and playing? And what channels are they on?
Yeah.
Because prioritizing the channels is so important when you have limited resources.
Mhm.
So that's some like free coaching advice.
Yeah.
No, but seriously, I say that to everybody. The prioritization is so important because you can't be all things to all people.
Yeah,
Okay, so
and I found that out, right? Like we were trying to do all of the social platforms, the Twitter,
mm,
and Instagram, Snapchat, all of that good stuff. And it was like, what are we even doing? Why are we on here? And I really
yeah,
had to think about like, what's our goal on this platform?
yes,
Um,
yes.
and that resulted in us, abandoning three of them and
Yeah,
saying, hey, we're gonna
smart.
focus on LinkedIn, Instagram, and newsletters, right? That's where our folks
Awesome.
are.
Yeah, and that makes so much sense. And that's probably I'm sure that's where your target audiences are, right? Your target, your key stakeholders.
Yep.
Really great. What's the most successful vehicle you've used that's helped you communicate most effectively with the people important to your organization? You personally, as Mark.
I think personally, kind of being able to connect with folks in person,
Mm,
do presentations has been
yeah,
really, really helpful for getting me my story and the org's story and our work in front of crowds that we may not have normally been able to connect with. And
yeah.
in-person communication is
How
has
do you have those? How do you are those presentations at organizations, events, or are you setting up one-on-one meetings? Are you do you have like a target for folks that you talk to each week? Like how does that work? I'm curious because other leaders need to do the same kind of thing.
all of the above. There are
Uh,
there are quarterly metrics around the number of events that we speak at, whether we're exposing our work to new crowds, and that kind of
mm,
segments down to X number of funders, X number of criminal justice stakeholders, etc. So I'll focus a lot of energy on kind of building out a calendar for the year as much as I can, based off
yeah,
of events that we know are happening, where we know our folks that we want to connect with are going to be there. And so that's one of the things that we focus on. The other thing is being able to attend our partners events, right? And there
mm,
we'll connect with folks, and be able to build relationships and connections that sometimes result in people actually enrolling and supporting our work. If not supporting it, at least being aware, right? And
yeah,
yeah, and so that's one of the ways that we ensure that we kind of just keep building our base of stakeholders, and connecting with folks in the community. Then the other thing that we do is spend a lot of time just doing like blind outreach to people.
oh
Um,
wow, really?
yeah, there's a lot of time doing
If
blind.
you spend a lot of time doing that, does that mean it's been effective for you?
Yeah, it's been effective for us for the most part. Yeah,
Okay, okay.
for me,
You don't you sorry, go ahead.
yeah, especially as it relates to like uh fundraising and stuff. That's kind of
Mm,
really, really helped.
okay, okay. I was gonna say you don't know how far ahead of the game you are by the because of the fact that you actually strategically think about where to show up to tell your story. So many organizations fail to do that. People who are, wanting to position themselves as thought leaders fail to do that. It's so important to think about where are the ideal places for me to be, for my organization, for my company to be, to really connect with key stakeholders in meaningful ways. So thank you for sharing that. I'm sure you educated somebody, gave them some knowledge about that tactic,
Yeah,
that strategy.
that was something that I had to learn. At one point, I was trying to be everywhere and everything to everybody and
Mm,
stretching myself thin,
yeah.
and then kind of figured out, where are the places that I absolutely need to be, but
Yeah.
also where would it support our team with developing and strengthening their skills if
Mm,
them to some of the audiences where we certainly need to be present, but it doesn't require me to be there
yeah. Oh, yeah. And that takes the pressure off you.
a
It
lot.
builds and supports them and develops them, and everybody wins.
Yep.
So my last question is the one I love to ask. If you could wave a magic wand, what would you want the world to know most deeply about you or about Chainless Change?
About the organization, it would be that even though we do like services and we do advocacy work, currently our primary focus has always been developing leaders, right? And it's
Mm,
different because there's so many barriers that people face that impede their ability to be their full selves, their best selves. And so, we really lean into leadership development as an organization. Um,
yeah,
yeah, and I don't think like folks really capture that or understand that as much, and that's something that's been challenging to communicate, right? Because folks want to hear about impacts on health and impacts on poverty or economic impacts. Uh,
yeah,
the real bread and butter is being able to develop leaders who are going to take the skills and tools that you share with them
yeah,
back home to their communities and work to transform things on their own independent of us. And that's how you really, I believe, build a legacy that's meaningful and that carries on.
yeah. This reminds me, I don't even know how PC this is to say this, but it reminds me of something that my father used to say about folks in prison. Like, he used to say, do you realize the kind of leadership skills that it takes to engage in the activity that these people were engaging in? Like, there are leadership qualities behind that. There's skills behind that. And if they could be directed in new ways, it would be amazing what we could see in folks. So anyway, that is my last question. Thank you so much for joining me. You are brilliant, and I'm so happy that we got a chance to have this conversation. So thank you so much, Mark.
Likewise, thanks for having me.
Thank you.